Go ahead and turn this off now. Anybody still need this? Okay, so again, hopefully you can find that spot in your notes where we... And we'll just continue it here. And I think, you know, we're starting to talk about cells and get through some of those topics. But before we do that, I think it's very valuable that we put everything in perspective, right? So we'll start back here. This we've discussed a lot about now, right? All of these macromolecules, carbohydrates, lipids, proteins, nucleic acids. Why is it that we spent so much time on these things before we actually start talking about living structures? Why do you think that's true? Yes?
Because not like living structures need these things to like work, or like need these things to function.
Excellent. Yeah. All living organisms, right, require these macromolecules. Every one. Carbohydrates are important for energy, right? Lipids, storage, energy, protein, structural, mechanical. We've gone through these issues, right? Nucleic acids, DNA. That's the information of life. All life is based upon these things. So it's important that we talk about these things first, so that later in the year, when I reference something like an enzyme, and I say, well, enzymes are proteins, then I don't have to go back and describe what a protein is. You already know what a protein is. And then we talked about, everybody has this, right? The cellular characteristics of life. You may not have them in this order, at least as you originally recorded them. But these are also very important, right? In other words, we say it this way. All cells can do these things. Every cell. Doesn't matter what kind of cell it is. Any cell can do these things. It can metabolize. That means how it gets energy, right? It can reproduce, certainly. It can grow and develop. It contains DNA. And it can maintain homeostasis, which is the ability of the organism to maintain internal consistency or balance. So any cell can do these things, right? Now, before we move on to the other levels, let's backtrack just a second. If I could reach inside of my body, hypothetically, and yank out a protein, one protein, is that protein living?
Yeah. Yes.
How many think yes? Thumbs up. Protein living. Thumbs down, no? Not sure this way. All right. If I could yank out one protein, that protein that I yanked out of my body, in fact, would be non-living. Though it was produced by a living structure. Say, well, how does that work? Well, here's the way it works. Why would we say that a protein, a singular protein, would be a non-living thing?
Some proteins, like they have like long strands, so like they're like linked together like by a bunch of amino acids.
Yeah, they're linked together by amino acids. Excellent. Yeah. So they're linked together by smaller substances. That is true. What would eliminate that, even that long strand? What would eliminate that from being considered a living structure or a living organism in itself? Excellent. If I took a singular protein, I would question myself. Can a singular protein metabolize on its own? No. Can it reproduce on its own? Can it grow and develop on its own? Does it have its own DNA? Can it maintain its own homeostasis? Does that make sense? Unless it can do those things, we don't say it's actually living. So therefore, individual proteins are non-living. Individual carbohydrates would be non-living, right? That makes sense. Okay. Let's keep moving from here. So after the cellular level, what do you think's next? What level? True. What do we call it? No? Okay. When I write it up here, you'll say, oh, okay. Starts with a T. Tissue. Okay, this is the tissue level. Tissue level. Yeah, now we're going. Now we're heading in the right direction. So if you want a definition of tissue, it's pretty simple. I'm not going to write the definition up here. But here's a definition of tissue. A group of cells that achieve the same or similar function. It's a group of cells that work together to achieve the same function. That's tissue. Now, at this point, let's just consider humans. Let's consider ourselves. We could consider any other organism out there that we wanted to, but let's consider humans. There are 4 tissue types in humans. Anybody know the names of these tissue types? 4 tissue types, yes. Yep, that's one of them. Muscular tissue. I'm just going to put muscle. Okay, muscle tissue. Okay, cartilage is it's an example. We don't call the entire group here by that name, but cartilage is an example of this. One example of several that can fit into this group. I'll get to it in just a moment if nobody else says anything. But any other thoughts with tissue types? So muscle. Okay, fat actually fits into another group too. Yes? Yes, nerve tissue, which will just, this is what it's called, right? Say nervous tissue, right? Nerves, neurons, nerves, nerve networks, brain, spinal cord, right? All of that. That's nervous tissue. Good. Any others? We'll go back to yours, cartilage. We're going to include now bone, ligaments, tendons, all of that stuff. That's really considered supportive tissue, okay? And that goes by the name of, not supportive tissue. It is supportive tissue, but it goes by the name of connective tissue. Heard of connective tissue before? So, yeah, are our bones living?
No. Yes. No.
Yeah, they are.
They're living. That bones are fully living, as much alive as any other structure in our body. It's true. Even though the bone is hard and dense, there's cells in it, and they're little bitty osteocytes, and they're in and around the framework of the bone tissue, the calcium, the calcified structure. And then in the middle of the bone is what we call marrow, right? What's the marrow producing? Marrow producing red blood cells. So you ever wonder where your red blood cells come from? No.
And I said, yeah.
Okay. It's interesting that the bone marrow inside your bone, that's what's producing the red blood cells. That's amazing. Okay, connected. We got one more to go. Anybody think of another tissue type? What's that? Okay, this one's obvious.
We know your organs.
Okay, that's actually the next level. We'll get to the organ level, but that's all right. That's all right. We're thinking. Yeah.
Your skin.
Skin. Okay. Skin is an example of this distinct type of tissue. Okay, we won't call it skin tissue, but skin is because anything that's in a lining of, that's this tissue.
That's it cartilage.
That cartilage would fit into connective. Here it is. So skin and other linings. When I write this up, you'll be like, oh, okay, I've heard of that. Epithelial tissue. So here's your 4 types of tissue, at least with the human body. Muscle tissue, nervous tissue, connective tissue, epithelial tissue. Right? So again, tissue is a group of cells that work together for a similar purpose. That's what tissue is. Take muscle tissue. What's the singular purpose of muscle tissue?
Like protect your muscles.
Yeah. Say it again.
Protect your muscles.
Okay, so
Like, kill your
and
muscles.
so I'm using my muscles now. What is it? What is that then?
What is what?
But I'm using my muscles now. So the purpose of the muscle would be
To move your arm.
to move, right? In other words, locomotion. The biological term here is locomotion. Muscle cells only do one thing, right? What's that one thing they do? They move, but what's the one action? If we really said, what's the one action? They contract. Muscle cells contract. That's all they do. So when I need to lift this book, right, it's not very heavy, good thing for me, but when I need to lift this book, my biceps, many cells in my biceps start to contract, and that allows motion. Now, when I set this book down, is it my biceps that is contracting at that point? What's contracting? The muscle on the back, the triceps, right? So biceps like this, and then actually my biceps relaxes, and my triceps starts to contract, which moves it down. That's called an antagonistic muscle group. We can talk about some of that later in the year when we get to the human body. But these are the types of tissue, right? Singular purpose. Good. Move on to the next. What's the next? Good. Organs. Now, there's a lot of organs in the human body, so we certainly can't list them all, but just throw some out here. Heart. Okay. Just throw them out. I'll listen. Heart, liver, spleen,
Skin.
skin, kidney. Is there something else that I heard?
Lungs.
Lungs. Okay. Brain. Yes. All right. That's a good list right there. And we could go on and on, right? These are all organs. So if you said, well, what's the definition of organ? Then it would go back to this, right? A group of tissues that work together with a singular function is an organ. See how this just builds on each other? So if we take something like the heart, right? Everybody has a basic concept of what the heart does. What does the heart do?
Pumps blood.
Yeah. Pumps blood, right? So let's think about this for a moment. How does the heart relate to the tissues? Well, that heart is one type of tissue primarily. Which one? Which one of these is the heart primarily? Muscle, that is correct. Does that mean there's no nervous tissue in the heart? No, there is. Anybody know where that's found? The nodes. Did you say nodes?
Did I say what?
Nodes?
Yeah.
I did.
I thought you said nodes. I really did. Okay. If you did, okay. Nodes. Have you heard of the SA node, AV node? It's okay if you haven't. Nodes are where the electrical impulses come in and they keep the rhythm of the heart, right? So in other words, there is a nervous tissue in the heart. What about connective tissue? So is connective tissue in the heart? Yeah, the valves. That's connective tissue. What about epithelial tissue? There's a lining of the heart. What is that called? Anybody heard of pericardium? Anybody heard of that? The pericardium is the lining of the heart. That's epithelial tissue. You see what's going on here? In other words, even though the heart is mostly muscle, all of these are involved. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right, let's move on. Organs are developed into what? Or contained within? Somebody said it. Organ systems. Good. Organ systems. Let's stick with the heart. What's the organ system of the heart? Okay, that's the purpose. That's good. What's the name of the organ system that the heart belongs to? Cardiovascular system. Good. Or circulatory system, right? Let's say cardiovascular is more precise.
Cardiovascular is like really useful.
All right. Well, we say sports that's related to cardiovascular function, right?
Yeah.
So can somebody pull that door just a tad bit? Thank you. Cardiovascular system, say cardio. If you go back to the original Greek, cardio or cardia literally means heart in Greek. Vascular, what is that referring to? Yeah, a little bit, but more vascular in this sense are the tubes. What tubes are we talking about primarily? Yeah, arteries, veins, capillaries, those sorts of things. In other words, why is this the system of the heart? Well, the heart is certainly the main organ, right? But the heart can't do it on its own. The heart pumps blood through the what? Yeah, the arteries, the veins, the tubes. If the tubes weren't there, the blood wouldn't have anywhere to go. So the whole system then is the cardiovascular system, right? So what's an organ system? A group of organs that work together for a singular purpose, right? See how this just builds on each other? So you got hearts, you got blood vessels, and their singular purpose is to do what? Yeah, pump the blood around the body. Okay? One more level. We'll have to work down here. What's the next level, final level? Organism, good. Now, if we're taking humans as our example, which we have been, of course you understand humans as an organism, right? You are humans, so that makes perfect sense. But understand that an organism, by definition, is a group of many organ systems that all work together to produce the organism, right? And now you can start to see that to produce the organism, you need more than the cardiovascular system, right? What are some other systems you might need? Nervous system, respiratory system, skin. Anybody know what the official name of skin is? Okay, dermis is a layer. Epidermis is a layer. Yeah, this is an interesting name. Let's see if you've heard of this before. The skin, the name of the skin, the system is integumentary system. Yeah, integumentary system means skin, pretty much this. Skin and anything that comes from the skin. So hair, fingernails, anything like that. If it's anything that comes from the skin, it's integumentary system. Okay, you guys kind of see the big picture here? Okay, we're not quite done. Just let me add one more thing in here as we move along. So if we trace back to here just for a moment, we've got abiotic. What does abiotic mean? Non-living, right? We've already talked about the fact that these are non-living. If I took a protein out of my body, it would be non-living. But then we move up this way, and we get to about this point. And at that point, everything beyond this is biotic, living. So let's kind of go back to the beginning of the year when we talked about naturalistic evolution as a worldview, naturalistic evolution, that everything evolved by chance, right, through natural means. Okay, if that's true, there are some problems. You can think of them as issues or problems, dilemmas, however you want to choose your terms here are fine. But remember, we've already talked about this. I say the first issue that we may encounter according to naturalistic evolution is this. How did these macromolecules form by chance?
Are you talking about the problem?
Yeah, the problems, yes.
Well, so the first one is matter can't be created or destroyed.
Okay.
So humans make those.
Yeah.
So yeah, just, it's not like someone like humans.
Right, good.
Not.
Yeah, that's excellent, yeah.
Yeah, it's almost impossible because essentially it's saying that, right? It's like came from that to like a giant organism. It doesn't work like that. Organisms produce those.
Right, good,
It's
excellent.
It's like opposite.
Yeah, excellent.
Those are made to support living things.
Yeah.
Like what you said, they couldn't back then.
Yeah, excellent. Let's put everything y'all said together. That's perfect. These come from living organisms. In other words, these macromolecules are produced by living organisms, right? So it's hard to think of a scenario that would actually produce these things by chance when there wasn't already a living organism to produce them. Does that make you're kind of jumping ship, or not jumping ship, but you're jumping ahead too far. You're saying here's biological organisms. I'm sorry, here's biological molecules that have come by chance, but we don't yet have the biological organism. And that just doesn't seem to work too well. Yes.
So there's no like the tissues, the definition of the tissues and the organ system are like build off each other.
Right.
Would like cellular be like a group of like what's it cellular?
Yeah, you could say it that way. You could say a group of macromolecules, if you want to think of it that way, that's fine. A group of macromolecules all producing similar functions would be cellular level.
So then what would you say for the molecule?
Yeah, that's where it gets tricky because what's you could just say maybe atoms back here, right? In other words, atoms that bond together in specific ways produce the macromolecules. Yeah. So good. We're going to call this chemical evolution. Not sure if you've ever heard of that term before, chemical evolution. In other words, the idea that these macromolecules just came about by chance, that would be chemical evolution. There's a lot of difficulties there, but there's more. Here's one too, right? What's this difficulty? We just kind of talked about it. Now you're jumping from what to what?
You're jumping from dead to living.
Yeah. You're jumping from non-life to life. Now that's huge. That's a big jump. Say non-life, non-living things to life. How did that happen? Another issue, problem, dilemma. Now, we'll talk a little bit more about this level later, not today. But that is a major issue, right? How do you go from these things and all of a sudden, now you got cellular structure, and that cellular structure can metabolize, can reproduce, can grow and develop, has DNA homeostasis. How does that happen naturally, by chance? That's a pretty big jump. Okay. But actually, you can kind of move along here a little bit further. Say maybe all about right here, you can have another level. Say maybe this is the third level. What do you think that might be?
Something to do with tissue.
Yeah, you're moving from now a single cell to cells that work together in tissue. So how might we phrase that? You're right, but how might we phrase that? Yeah, go ahead.
Like has tissue or like within tissue?
Okay. I'm going to say this. Multicellularity. In other words, back here, a single cell can do all these things, right? So if naturalistic evolution is true, a single cell could have done all these things. The question then would be, why would a single cell need to pair together with other cells if they can do everything they need on their own? Why then multicellularity? Why would that have to come about through a naturalistic means? Now, of course, we understand that multicellularity has its advantages, right? Yeah, it certainly has its advantages. But I'm just speaking in naturalistic terms. Why would you have to make a jump from unicellular to multicellular? Does that make sense? But why would that step be necessary? Okay. Then maybe there's even one last step. We'll put it all about right here. It kind of relates to multicellularity, but I think it's a little bit more complex in the end. Anybody think they know what that is? I know you don't know the terms that I'm going to use, but you think you know what I mean? We'll call this cooperativity. In other words, now you've got a lot of different things, organs and organ systems, and all of that is working together, cooperativity. In a naturalistic sense, you may wonder why, if everything came about by chance, why do things in a complex organism like humans, why does everything work together so well? How was it that the nervous system started to control everything? How is it that the respiratory system works so closely with the circulatory system? You see what's going on here? There's a lot of cooperativity. How did that come about by chance? So you may say there's kind of four levels here: original chemical evolution, non-life to life, multicellularity, and then cooperativity. Does that make sense? Now we're going to think on some of these issues later, especially this one here, non-life to life. That's a pretty big one. Okay, everybody good? Any last questions with this discussion? Okay, in just a moment, we're going to do a little video clip. I will address that in just a moment. Keep your notes out. Don't put your notes out away. Don't put them away yet. In the video, which deals with the cell theory, there's a few points that I want you to jot down a little information. Okay, all right. Give me just a second to transition.